A polite greeting was enough for her to be ignored. But when she showed who she really was, the atmosphere changed. What seemed like a routine bank transaction turned into a silent revolution with a name and a cause. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep creating stories like this. Since the beginning of the school year, the new art teacher had caused quite a stir among students and colleagues at the National School of Fine Arts in Portland. Ms. Sarah Mitchell, with her unconventional methods and strict personality, firmly believed that everyone, without exception, should surpass themselves no matter the cost. For her, art was the only legitimate way to express human potential, and dance in particular was the purest language. Without disguises, without escapes, just the body and truth. She had only been at the school for 3 months, but her reputation preceded her. The hallways filled with whispers whenever her heels resonated against the old mosaic floor. She was respected, admired, but also feared. On that cloudy day with noisy corridors, when Ms. Mitchell entered the classroom carrying an old music player and a list in hand, everyone knew something important was about to happen. "Good morning, class," she said, in her characteristic firm tone while placing her materials on the desk. "Today I'll inform you about the upcoming evaluation assignment." The students exchanged nervous glances. Ms. Mitchell's evaluations were famous for their difficulty and demands. "The assignment will consist of an individual dance presentation," she continued, "with a theme of your choice, to be presented live in front of the entire class." There was a general murmur that she silenced with a simple gesture of her hand. "And one more thing, the order of presentations will be defined by me, no justifications, no refusals." Among the students was Lucy Reyes, known as Lucy by everyone at school. A 17-year-old girl of average height, but with a body that didn't fit the standards of most of her classmates. Since she was little, Lucy had been the target of mockery for her figure. Her robust build contrasted with the slim silhouettes of many of her classmates, especially Victoria Pearson, the most popular student in the class and an aspiring professional dancer. When Ms. Mitchell began to read the list with the order of presentations, Lucy kept her gaze fixed on her notebook, drawing concentric circles to calm her anxiety. She listened attentively to each name, hoping hers would appear soon, so the agony of waiting would end. But her name didn't appear until the end. "And finally," announced the teacher, "Lucy Reyes." Muffled laughter was heard throughout the classroom. Victoria turned to her friends and whispered something that provoked more giggles. Ms. Mitchell observed the scene with penetrating eyes, but said nothing. She just pointed directly at Lucy and declared, "You will dance last." Lucy's heart sank. Being last meant that all eyes would be on her after having seen the best dancers in the class. It meant being compared to Victoria, to Matthew, to all those who seemed to have been born to move with grace. Ms. Mitchell continued explaining the details. They would have 2 weeks to prepare. The presentation would take place in the school's small auditorium, and it would be open to other teachers and even some parents. "The fear of performing is the first obstacle you must destroy," she said as she walked between the rows of desks. "True artistic expression emerges when we dare to be vulnerable." When the bell rang marking the end of the class, Lucy was the first to gather her things and try to leave. But the teacher's voice stopped her. "Lucy, can you stay for a moment?" The girl stopped in her tracks, feeling her stomach tighten. She waited for everyone to leave, ignoring the looks from Victoria and her group. "Why did I put you last?" asked the teacher once they were alone. Lucy swallowed, not daring to look up. "Because I'm the worst," she responded in a thin voice. "Ms. Mitchell smiled slightly. "I put you last because I believe you have something that others need to see, something that will only be fully appreciated after having seen everything else." Lucy looked up, confused. How could the teacher think that? She had never danced in public. She didn't even know if she could dance. The teacher seemed to read her thoughts. "There are different types of dance, Lucy. Not everything is technique and precision. Sometimes the most powerful dance comes from the soul, not from training." That night, in the small house she shared with her grandmother Martha in the outskirts of Portland, Lucy couldn't eat. The plate of stew that her grandmother had prepared with such care remained almost untouched. "What's wrong, my child?" asked the old woman sitting next to her. "Nothing, Grandma," Lucy lied. But Martha, with that wisdom that only comes with years, took her hand. "You can't fool me, Lucy. I've known you since you were the size of an ear of corn." Finally, through tears, Lucy told her about the assignment, about the laughter, about the paralyzing fear she felt. The old woman listened in silence, stroking her granddaughter's hair. When Lucy finished, Martha got up with difficulty from her chair and walked to an old wooden chest that she kept in her room. She returned with a small vinyl record. "Do you know why I've never told you about my youth?" she asked. Lucy shook her head. "Because there are things better shown than told." That night, in the living room of their humble home with the curtains closed and only the light of an old lamp, Martha put the record on an ancient record player. The first chords of a soul song filled the room. And then, before Lucy's astonished eyes, her 75-year-old grandmother began to move with a grace and passion that seemed impossible for her age. "Before your grandfather met me," said Martha between movements, "I was a dancer. Not on big stages, but in small bars in New Orleans." The revelation left Lucy speechless. Her grandmother, always so discreet and traditional, had a past that she was completely unaware of. "But Grandma, why did you never mention it?" Martha stopped, her wrinkled face illuminated by a melancholic smile. "Because when I met your grandfather, his family didn't approve of a woman dedicated to dancing. I decided to give it up for love, but never, not a single day, did I stop dancing in my heart." She approached Lucy and took her hands. "And now, my child, it's your turn to dance, not as others want you to dance, but as your heart tells you." Dinky. Following days were a discovery for Lucy. Each night after they finished their chores, she and her grandmother closed the doors, drew the curtains, and danced together. Martha taught her movements she had learned decades ago, but more importantly, she taught her to feel the music, to let her body respond naturally, without pressure or expectations. "People mock what they don't understand," she would say as they practiced. "And what they don't understand is that true dance has no form, no weight, no label. It only has heart." At school, Lucy kept a low profile during rehearsals. While other students shared their progress, she limited herself to observing. Victoria and her group interpreted this as incapacity or fear, and they didn't miss an opportunity to make hurtful comments. "Have you decided what song you'll use for your non-dance?" Victoria asked her one day, provoking laughter among her friends. But Lucy, for the first time, didn't feel diminished by those words. She carried a secret inside her, a secret that gave her strength. The day before the presentation, while Lucy and her grandmother went through the choreography they had created together one last time, the old woman handed her a small package, wrapped in newspaper. "Open it tomorrow just before you dance," she told her with a smile. "It will give you the courage you need." That night, Lucy could barely sleep. In her mind, fear and anticipation mixed. But among all that whirlwind of emotions, there was something new, a spark of courage, a burning desire to show her truth, to dance not to impress, but to free herself. The morning of the presentation dawned with a grey sky over Portland. Heavy, clouds threatened to release their rain at any moment, as if the sky itself wanted to accompany the tension Lucy felt inside. She dressed carefully, placing in her backpack the clothes she would wear to dance, a simple black outfit that her grandmother had discreetly modified, adding small details in red thread that would only be noticed with movement. She also packed the mysterious package that Martha had given her the night before. Before leaving, her grandmother hugged her tightly. "Remember, my child," she whispered in her ear, "today you don't dance for them. You dance for yourself, for me, for all the women who once were afraid to show themselves as they are." The small auditorium of the National School of Fine Arts had been transformed for the occasion. Miss Mitchell, true to her philosophy of creating complete artistic experiences, had organized everything as if it were a professional show. Additional lights had been installed, a burgundy background curtain, and chairs arranged in a semicircle so that everyone could observe without obstacles. Upon entering, Lucy noticed that not only were her classmates there, but also several teachers from other disciplines and even some parents who had been invited. Among the audience, she distinguished Edward Sullivan, the director of the prestigious Contemporary Dance Academy of New York City, who had apparently come to scout for talent. The presence of such an important figure only increased the pressure on all the students, especially on Victoria, who dreamed of being accepted into that academy. While waiting in a small room adjacent to the auditorium, nerves were palpable. Some reviewed their movements in silence, others gave each other words of encouragement. Victoria and her group kept apart, whispering and occasionally glancing at Lucy, who had sat in a corner, focusing on her breathing as her grandmother had taught her. "Attention, students," announced Ms. Mitchell upon entering the waiting room. "We start in 5 minutes. Remember, I'm not looking for technical perfection, I'm looking for truth. I want to see your soul in every movement." Her eyes briefly stopped on Lucy before continuing. "The order will be the same as I announced. Get ready." The presentation began with Matthew Foster, a tall, athletic boy who had prepared a routine inspired by breakdance. His energy and precision earned enthusiastic applause. He was followed by other students, each showing their strengths: Isabel with her almost ethereal grace, Carlos with his dramatic intensity, Sophia with her mix of contemporary styles. From backstage, Lucy observed each presentation, admiring the diversity of expressions. But she also noticed how, after each performance, gazes were discreetly directed towards her, as if anticipating what would come, or rather, what they believed would not come. Halfway through the program came Victoria's turn. With her black hair perfectly gathered in a bun and a leotard that accentuated her slender figure, she went out on stage with the confidence of someone who knows they are admired. Her presentation was technically impeccable, a combination of classical ballet and contemporary dance that demonstrated years of formal training. Her precise movements, her perfect turns, and her elegant jumps evidenced why she was considered the best dancer in the class. When she finished, there was an ovation. Even Director Sullivan nodded in approval. Victoria returned to the waiting room with a triumphant smile, receiving congratulations from everyone. As she passed by Lucy, she stopped. "Good luck," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll need it not to make a fool of yourself after what they just saw." Lucy just nodded, not letting herself be provoked. Inside her, a fire was beginning to burn. The presentations continued, and with each one that passed, Lucy's moment drew closer. Finally, she was left alone in the waiting room. Everyone else had had their turn, and now they were sitting in the auditorium, waiting for the last performance, the one that, according to what they believed, would be the weakest, perhaps even the most comical. In that moment of solitude, Lucy opened the small package her grandmother had given her. Inside, she found an old silver bracelet with small bells. That tinkled softly. A note accompanied the jewel. "This belonged to my mother, your great-grandmother Marie, who wore it when she danced at her village festivals. It carries the strength of all the women in our family. Now it is yours." Lucy placed the bracelet on her left wrist, feeling a strange warmth that seemed to emanate from the metal. She breathed deeply. It was time. "Lucy Reyes, Ms. Mitchell," announced from the stage. An expectant silence mixed with some murmurs and stifled giggles received the name. Lucy walked towards the stage with short but determined steps. She dressed simply. Black pants, white blouse with those discreet details in red thread. The bracelet on her wrist occasionally caught glimpses of the lights. Nothing in her appearance particularly drew attention. She positioned herself in the center of the stage and nodded to the sound technician who pressed play. The first chords of an instrumental version of "A Change Is Gonna Come" by Sam Cooke began to sound slow and deep. For the first few seconds, Lucy remained motionless, with her eyes closed, letting the music envelop her. The audience waited, some with genuine curiosity, others prepared for the disappointment they anticipated. And then she began to move. Her first movements were soft, almost timid, as if she were waking from a long dream. But in every gesture there was an intention, a story that began to be told without words. The audience, which at first whispered, began to fall silent. There was something in the way Lucy moved that captured attention, something unexpected. As the music progressed, intensifying, Lucy's dance also gained strength. She was no longer the insecure girl everyone knew. On stage was a woman who expressed with her body years of contained emotions. Her arms drew in the air stories of pain, of rejection, but also of resistance and self-love. Her feet marked the floor with determination, claiming a space that had always belonged to her. The bracelet tinkled with each movement, adding a sonic dimension to her performance. It was as if the women of her lineage were dancing with her, accompanying her in every step. The most surprising thing for those watching was the transformation occurring before their eyes. Lucy's body, which had so often been the object of mockery, now moved with a grace and strength that defied any prejudice. It wasn't a body trying to hide or apologize for existing. It was a body celebrating its own existence, occupying the space with pride. Misty Mitchell, who was watching from the side of the stage, felt her skin prickle. In her years as a teacher, she had rarely witnessed such an honest, raw, and yet beautiful artistic expression. She knew she had been right to place Lucy last. This was the lesson she wanted everyone to learn, that true art transcends forms and expectations. When Martin said, the music reached its climax. Lucy's movements became more intense, more confessional. It was as if she were releasing everything she had kept inside for years. There was no studied technique in her movements, but pure emotion translated into body language. It was impossible not to be moved. This was not a simple school presentation. It was a declaration, a danced manifesto about self-acceptance and courage. Even Victoria, who had started the presentation with a mocking smile, now observed in silence, with an indescribable expression on her face. Director Sullivan had leaned forward in his seat, completely absorbed in what he was witnessing. The song was coming to an end, and Lucy's movements became soft again, as if completing a cycle. In the final chords, she spun 3 times, with the bracelet creating a sound trail around her, and finally stood still with her head high and arms extended, as if embracing the world, or perhaps, for the first time, herself. When the music stopped, the auditorium was in complete silence. Lucy remained in her final position for a few seconds, with her eyes closed, assimilating what had just happened. Only then did she lower her arms and open her eyes, finding herself facing a sea of faces that looked at her in a completely new way. The silence lasted for what seemed like an eternity, and then, from the back of the auditorium, a solitary applause emerged. It was Ms. Mitchell. To that applause another joined and another. In a matter of seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding with an intensity that made the walls vibrate. Some even shouted bravo with tears in their eyes. Lucy didn't know how to react. She had never imagined such a response. She made a small bow and left the stage, still stunned by what she had just experienced. In the small dressing room, away from everyone's gaze, she finally allowed herself to cry. They weren't tears of sadness or relief, but of pure liberation. She had danced her truth, and the world had received it. When she managed to calm down and went out into the hallway, she found herself surrounded by classmates who sincerely congratulated her. Even those who had previously participated in the mockery now looked at her with new respect. Miss Mitchell approached and, without saying anything, hugged her. It was a brief but significant hug. "This," the teacher finally said, "is exactly what I was talking about on the first day." True dance doesn't come from technique, it comes from the soul. Among the crowd that had formed around Lucy, a figure appeared that no one expected. Director Edward Sullivan. With his characteristic seriousness, he made his way until he stood in front of her. "Miss Reyes," said Director Sullivan in a measured voice, extending his hand towards Lucy, "it has been an extraordinary presentation." A murmur of astonishment ran through the hallway. Edward Sullivan, known for his demanding standards and scarce praise, was recognizing the talent of the girl everyone had underestimated. Victoria, who was observing the scene from a few meters away, felt her world wobble. She had dedicated years to perfecting her technique, to keeping her body in optimal condition, all to impress figures like Sullivan. And now he was completely ignoring her to congratulate Lucy. "I would like to talk to you about your future in dance," continued the director. "You have an uncommon gift, the ability to communicate genuine emotions through movement. That is not taught in any academy." Ms. Mitchell intervened, placing a protective hand on her student's shoulder. "I think Lucy needs a moment to assimilate what has happened today," she said firmly. "Could we continue this conversation at another time?" The E. Director nodded, understanding. He took a card from his pocket and handed it to Lucy. "Call me when you're ready to talk. My academy would be honored to have someone like you." When the director walked away, Lucy looked at the card in her hand with disbelief. Everything seemed like a dream from which she feared waking up. "Miss." Mitchell noticed her confusion. "Come. Hon, you need some air," she said, guiding her towards a small inner courtyard where students usually gathered during breaks. The space was deserted at that moment, offering a refuge of tranquility after so much intensity. They sat on a stone bench under a jacaranda tree that was beginning to bloom, sprinkling the ground with small purple flowers. "How do you feel?" asked the teacher. Lucy breathed deeply before answering. "Honestly, I don't know. Everything has happened so fast. What you did in there," continued the teacher, "is what I've been trying to teach for years. Technique can be acquired. With practice, but honesty in art. That's a much rarer gift." As they conversed, they didn't notice that someone was watching them from the entrance to the courtyard. Victoria, with reddened eyes and clenched fists, contemplated the scene with a mixture of emotions that not even she could decipher. She had worked all her life to be recognized, had sacrificed parties, friendships, even meals, all in the name of perfection in dance. And in a few minutes, Lucy, the girl everyone underestimated, had surpassed her without apparent effort. It wasn't fair. It simply wasn't fair. That night, the news of Lucy's extraordinary presentation spread throughout the school and beyond. Students who had attended told with amazement how the shy girl had transformed on stage. Videos recorded with phones began to circulate in chat groups, accompanied by enthusiastic comments. Even those who had not witnessed the moment wanted to know more about the dancer who had impressed Director Sullivan. Meanwhile, in the small house on the outskirts, Lucy narrated to her grandmother every detail of what had happened. Martha listened with a serene smile, as if she had always known this day would come. "The bracelet worked," said Lucy, showing the jewel she still wore on her wrist. "I felt as if I wasn't dancing alone." "You weren't alone," replied the old woman, caressing her granddaughter's hair. "You never have been. All the women in our family danced with you today." After dinner, while Lucy slept deeply, exhausted by the emotions of the day, Martha took out a carved wooden box from an old chest. Inside, she kept sepia photographs, yellowed, newspaper clippings, and an old program from a show titled The Sirens of New Orleans. In the central photograph of the program, 5 young dancers posed in bright costumes. In the center, a Martha of barely 20 years smiled at the camera with the same bracelet that Lucy now wore. "She did it, Robert," whispered the old woman, looking at a small photograph of her late husband. "Our granddaughter has found her path." The next morning, Lucy returned to school with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. She didn't know how she would be received after what had happened. Upon entering the classroom, she noticed that conversations briefly stopped and looks were directed at her. But they weren't mocking looks like before. There was respect in them, even admiration. She took her usual seat at the back of the classroom, trying to go unnoticed, despite the new attention. Sofia Vasquez, a classmate with whom she had barely exchanged a few words in the past, approached her desk. "Hi, Lucy," she said with a genuine smile. "I just wanted to tell you that yesterday, you were amazing. I've never seen anyone dance like that." Before Lucy could respond, more classmates approached to congratulate her. In a matter of minutes, she found herself surrounded by students who wanted to talk to her, to really get to know her for the first time. The only notable absence was Victoria, whose seat remained empty. Miss Mitchell entered the classroom and the class began. Unlike other days, Lucy actively participated, sharing her ideas about the artistic topics being discussed. It was as if an invisible wall had fallen, allowing her to be part of the group for the first time. During the break, while Lucy was talking with her new friends in the courtyard, Victoria finally appeared. She looked pale, with marked dark circles under her eyes and her hair carelessly pulled back, very different from her usual impeccable appearance. She walked directly towards Lucy, and everyone around fell silent, anticipating a confrontation. "I need to talk to you," said Victoria with a tense voice. "Alone." Lucy hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. They moved away from the group towards a quieter corner of the courtyard. "How did you do it?" Victoria asked without preamble once they were alone. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" There was no hostility in her voice, just a genuine perplexity. "My grandmother taught me," Lucy responded with sincerity. "She was a dancer in her youth." Victoria looked at her fixedly, as if evaluating the truthfulness of her words. "But it's not just technique, is it? There's something else, something I don't have." Lucy was surprised at the sudden vulnerability of someone who had always seemed so confident. "I think I simply allowed myself to feel the music, to be myself without fear of judgment." A solitary tear rolled down Victoria's cheek. 10 years, she said with a broken voice. 10 years of classes, training, diets, sacrifices, all to be perfect. And you come along and in a single presentation achieve what I haven't been able to accomplish in my entire life. Lucy didn't know what to respond. She had never seen this side of Victoria. She had always perceived her as unreachable, superior. Now she saw that under that facade of perfection was a girl as insecure as herself. "It's not a competition," Lucy finally said. "Each person has their own path in art." Victoria dried the tear with the back of her hand, regaining part of her composure. "Director Sullivan didn't even look at me after my presentation. All that I've worked for, all that I've sacrificed, and for what?" Her voice contained a bitterness that Lucy understood perfectly. She herself had felt that type of hopelessness many times. Maybe you're dancing for the wrong reasons," suggested Lucy cautiously. "What do you mean?" "My grandmother says that when we dance to impress others, we're never truly free. True dance emerges when we do it for ourselves, to express what we carry inside." Victoria kept silent, considering those words. Finally, with a sigh, she said, "I have to go. I need to think." She quickly walked away, leaving Lucy with a strange feeling of connection with someone she had always considered her opposite. The rest of the day passed in a kind of haze for Lucy. Between classes, she received a message from the principal's office. Professor Edward Sullivan had requested a formal meeting with her and her legal guardian for the next day. The reality of the opportunities that were opening before her began to sink in. That afternoon, as she walked back home, she noticed someone following her. She stopped and turned to find Matthew Foster, one of the most respected dancers in the class. "Hello," he said with certain shyness, something unusual in someone generally so confident. "I wanted to accompany you, if you don't mind." Lucy nodded, surprised. She had never really talked with Matthew outside of school activities. They began to walk together in an initially uncomfortable silence. "Your presentation yesterday," Matthew began after a few minutes. "It was really special." "Thank you," responded Lucy, still not accustomed to receiving compliments. "Yours was very good too." "Mine was technical, rehearsed, calculated," he said with a melancholic smile. "Yours was real. That's much more valuable." Lucy looked at him with curiosity. She had always thought of Matthew as part of the group of the perfect ones, those students who seemed to do everything right without effort. She had never imagined that he could feel unsatisfied with his own performance. "You know," continued Matthew, "I've always danced to please my parents. My father was a professional dancer and expects me to follow in his footsteps. I've never asked myself if it's what I really want." The confession surprised Lucy. "And what is it that you really want?" she asked. Matthew smiled sadly. "That's the problem. I don't even know anymore." Upon reaching a corner where their paths separated, Matthew stopped. "There's an experimental dance presentation this weekend at the Cultural Centre," he said, taking 2 tickets from his pocket. "I was wondering if you'd like to go with me." Lucy felt her cheeks blush. Never before had a boy invited her out. "I'd love to," she responded with a shy smile. Matthew handed her one of the tickets, their fingers briefly brushing, sending a small electric current up Lucy's arm. "See you tomorrow in class," he said, walking away with a smile. Lucy continued her way home, with the sensation of living someone else's life. In just one day, her entire world had changed. From being the invisible girl everyone ignored or ridiculed, she was now the center of attention, receiving invitations, having potential professional opportunities. It was overwhelming and exciting at the same time. Upon arriving home, she found her grandmother in the small backyard, watering the chili plants she cultivated with such care. She told her about the meeting with Director Sullivan, about the conversation with Victoria, about Matthew's invitation. Martha listened attentively, with a serene smile on her wrinkled face. "Be careful, my child," the old woman finally said. "Success can be as dangerous as failure, if we don't keep our feet on the ground." "What do you mean, Grandma?" "That you shouldn't let the applause make you forget who you really are, nor let new friendships blind you to those who have always been by your side." Lucy nodded, understanding the wisdom in her grandmother's words. It was easy to get carried away by this new reality, to forget the lessons learned during difficult years. "There's something I want to show you," said Martha, guiding her granddaughter towards the inside of the house. On the dining table, she had placed the wooden box she had looked through the night before. "It's time for you to know more about our history." Martha opened the box carefully, like someone revealing a long-kept treasure. The first thing she took out was the yellowed program for the show The Sirens of New Orleans. She handed it to Lucy, who examined it with astonishment. "Is this you, Grandma?" she asked, pointing to the young woman in the center. The old woman nodded with a nostalgic smile. "We were 20 years old and had the world ahead of us. We were 5 friends who had grown up together in a small town near New Orleans, all with the same dream, to dance professionally." Lucy had never imagined this past. Her grandmother had always been for her the maternal figure who cooked with love, who told old stories, who said the rosary every night. Seeing her now as a young dancer, with dreams and ambitions similar to her own, was revealing. "What happened to the group?" she asked, genuinely interested. Martha's smile turned bittersweet. "Life, my child. Life happened." She took more photographs from the box, showing different stages of her career as a dancer. "For almost 10 years we traveled throughout America. We weren't famous nationally, but in the circuit of clubs and small theaters, the Sirens of New Orleans had their audience." Lucy was fascinated. Each photograph showed her grandmother and her friends in different costumes, always smiling, always together. "Then I met your grandfather," continued Martha. "Robert was a musician who played in one of the clubs where we performed. It was love at first sight." Her voice softened as she remembered. "But his family was very traditional. For them, a club dancer was not a suitable wife for their son." "Did they force you to stop dancing?" asked Lucy, feeling a pang of indignation. "Nobody forced me," the old woman responded firmly. "It was my decision. In those days, options for women were limited. I had to choose between my career or a life, with the man I loved." She took out another photograph, this time of her wedding. A young Martha dressed as a bride, next to a handsome man with a thin mustache who looked at the camera with a serious expression. "Your grandfather never asked me to stop dancing. It was his parents who set that condition, and I was so in love that I accepted." Lucy felt a mixture of emotions. On one hand, she admired her grandmother's sacrifice for love. On the other, she regretted that she had had to give up her passion. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked in a low voice. Martha remained silent for a moment, considering the question. "There were difficult moments," she finally admitted. "Days when I would hear a song and my body wanted to move, but I contained myself. Nights when I dreamed I was on a stage and woke up crying." She took her granddaughter's hands in hers, her wrinkled fingers caressing the young skin. "But I had a good life with your grandfather. We had your mother, and then we had you. And now seeing you dance, it's as if a part of me had been asleep all these years and finally woke up." Lucy hugged her grandmother, moved by the story and by the connection she felt with her, stronger than ever. "What happened to the other sirens?" she asked when they separated. The old woman sighed. "Carmen got married shortly after I did and also stopped dancing. Lola continued for a few more years, but eventually opened a dance school in Memphis. Josephine had an accident that damaged her knee, and Teresa—" She paused, as if hesitating to continue. "Teresa was the only one who went far. She managed to join an important company in New York City. For years I followed her performances in the newspapers. Are you still in contact with any of them?" Martha shook her head. "Time and distance separated us. The last time I saw Teresa was more than 30 years ago, when she came to Portland with her company." She continued taking out memories from the box, newspaper clippings, programs, even a pair of small wooden castanets that she had once used in her performances. Each object had a story, a memory that she generously shared with Lucy. "Do you know why I'm telling you all this now?" the old woman finally asked. Lucy shook her head. "Because I want you to understand that the opportunity you have in front of you is precious. In my time, a woman had to choose between family and career. You don't have to make that choice." She showed Lucy the card that Director Sullivan had given her. "This is your opportunity to live the dream that many of us had to abandon. But you must be sure that it's what you really want." Lucy contemplated the card, thoughtful. "What if I'm not good enough? What if yesterday was just luck?" Martha smiled tenderly. "What you showed yesterday wasn't luck, my child. It was your truth, and that truth will always be with you, waiting to be danced." The conversation extended into the night, with Lucy absorbing every story, every piece of advice, every warning that her grandmother shared. For the first time, she saw Martha not only as her protector and guide, but as a woman who had had her own dreams, her own struggles, her own difficult decisions. That night, Lucy dreamed of illuminated stages and generations of women dancing, together united by music and shared passion. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the weather wanted to reflect the optimism Lucy felt. She dressed with special care for the meeting with Director Sullivan, choosing a simple but elegant dress that had belonged to her mother. The silver bracelet, which she now considered her amulet, completed the outfit. Martha had also dressed up for the occasion in her best dress and with her white hair gathered in an impeccable bun. Together, grandmother and granddaughter walked towards the school, where a meeting awaited them that could change the course of their lives. The office of the principal of the National School of Fine Arts was a spacious and bright space, decorated with works by former students who had achieved recognition. Principal Martin, an affable man in his 60s, received them warmly. Next to him was Edward Sullivan with his characteristic serious expression. "Mrs. Reyes, Miss Reyes, thank you for coming," greeted Principal Martin, indicating that they should take a seat. "As you know, Professor Sullivan was very impressed with Lucy's presentation." Edward Sullivan nodded, looking directly at Lucy. "What I saw yesterday is not something common," he said in a grave voice. "I have seen hundreds of technically perfect dancers who don't manage to transmit even a fraction of what you transmitted in those minutes." Lucy lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the praise from someone so respected in the dance world. "The National Academy of Contemporary Dance is looking for new talents," continued Sullivan. "Not just technical ones, but artists who have something to say. And you, Miss Reyes, definitely have something to say." The meeting lasted for almost an hour. Sullivan explained the details of the special program offered by the Academy. Intensive classes during the summer, with the possibility of a full scholarship if Lucy demonstrated commitment and progress. The program was designed for unconventional talents, those who perhaps didn't have traditional training but showed unique potential. "It would be an honor to have you as part of our institution," Sullivan concluded, "but the decision, of course, is yours." Martha, who had remained silent during most of the meeting, finally spoke. "Before responding, I would like to ask a question," she said firmly. "What guarantees are there that you won't try to change my granddaughter's essence?" I don't want her to lose what makes her special by adapting to an academic mold. Sullivan smiled, visibly impressed by the question. A valid concern, Ma'am. I can assure you that our approach has evolved a lot in recent years. We don't seek to create identical copies, but to nurture and develop individual voices. Your granddaughter's talent would not be suppressed, but refined. Lucy looked at her grandmother, seeking her approval. The old woman nodded slightly, indicating that the final decision was hers. I would like to accept the opportunity, said Lucy with a firm voice, but I need time to think about it carefully. Of course, replied Sullivan. Take all the time you need. The Academy begins its summer courses in 2 months. I'll wait for your answer until then. As they left the meeting, Lucy and Martha encountered Ms. Mitchell in the hallway. By her expression, it was evident that she had been waiting to speak with them. How did everything go, she asked, genuinely interested. Lucy told her about Sullivan's offer, unable to hide the mixture of enthusiasm and nervousness she felt. The teacher listened attentively, occasionally nodding. It's a great opportunity, she said when Lucy finished her account. Sullivan is demanding but fair. His academy has produced some of the best contemporary dancers in the country. She paused, as if considering whether to continue. But there's something you should know before making your decision. Lucy and her grandmother exchanged looks of curiosity. What is it, Professor? Asked the young woman. You're not the only student from this school who has received an offer from Sullivan, replied Sarah. Victoria was also invited to the summer program. The news surprised Lucy. After Victoria's reaction the previous day, she had assumed that Sullivan had completely ignored her, but she seemed so upset, she began to say. Because she received the offer before seeing you dance, explained the teacher, and after your presentation, Sullivan told her that they would have to compete for a single full scholarship position. Martha frowned, clearly displeased with the information. Are they pitting the girls against each other like fighting roosters? Mrs. Mitchell sighed. I don't agree with that approach, but that's how the professional dance world works. The competition is intense and opportunities are limited. Lucy processed the information in silence. The idea of competing directly against Victoria troubled her, not out of fear of not being up to the task, but because she understood the pain and frustration that her classmate must be feeling. Does Victoria know? Does she know? That I also received an offer. The teacher nodded. Sullivan spoke with her immediately after your presentation. That's why she reacted the way she did yesterday. Now everything made sense to Lucy. Victoria's sudden vulnerability, her bitterness, her feeling that all her effort had been in vain. It wasn't just envy or surprise at Lucy's unexpected talent. It was the real fear of losing the opportunity she had been pursuing for years. Thank you for telling me, teacher, said Lucy. I needed to know. As they walked back home, Lucy shared her thoughts with her grandmother. I don't like the idea of them pitting us against each other. Dance shouldn't be about defeating others, but about expressing oneself. Martha smiled, with pride at her granddaughter's wisdom. You're right, my love, but that's how the world is sometimes. The important thing is how we decide to play the game that's been set before us. When they reached the corner where their paths separated from Ms. Mitchell's, she stopped them with a gesture. There's something else I want to tell you, she added. The end-of-course performance will be in a month. Traditionally, students prepare individual pieces, but this year I was thinking of something different. A joint number, where each student can show their unique style within a collaborative choreography. Lucy's eyes lit up at the idea. Everyone, dancing together, even Victoria, confirmed the teacher. Especially Victoria and you. I think you have a lot to learn from each other. On the way back home, Lucy couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened in just 2 days. Her life had taken a complete turn, offering her possibilities she had never imagined. But with those opportunities came new challenges, new decisions, new responsibilities. For the first time, she felt she had the power to choose her own path. And that, more than the applause or academic offers, was the true gift that dance had given her. Upon arriving home, she found a message from Matthew on her phone, confirming the details for their outing on the weekend. The idea of sharing her love for dance with him now from this new perspective, filled her with anticipation. "What are you thinking about, my child?" asked Martha, noticing the smile on her granddaughter's face. "About the future, Grandma," replied Lucy. "For the first time, I'm excited about what it might bring." The old woman nodded with understanding. "The future is always dancing before us, waiting for us to dare to follow its rhythm." That afternoon, while Lucy was helping, her grandmother prepared dinner. An unexpected visitor knocked on the door. Opening it, she found herself face to face with Victoria. "We need to talk," said the girl with a determined expression that Lucy had not seen before in her. Martha observed the young woman who was on the threshold of her door and, with the wisdom that only years bestow, made a welcoming gesture. "Come in, child. Important conversations are better had with a bit of hot chocolate." Victoria hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the warm reception. She had come prepared to face resistance, not hospitality. She entered the small living room, where the aroma of cinnamon and vanilla permeated the air. Lucy remained silent, observing the exchange between her grandmother and her unexpected visitor. In a few minutes, the three were sitting around the table with steaming cups of chocolate in front of them. The atmosphere was strangely peaceful, considering the tension that existed between the two young women. "I suppose you know why I'm here," Victoria began, addressing Lucy. Her voice, usually charged with confidence, now sounded vulnerable. "Ms. Mitchell told me everything. Sullivan's offer, the scholarship, the competition." Lucy nodded. "I found out this morning. I've worked my entire life to get into the academy," continued Victoria. "Since I was 5 years old, my mother has taken me to ballet classes. I've given up parties, friends, a normal life, all for this dream." She took a sip of chocolate as if seeking strength to continue. "And now, after all that effort, after finally receiving an offer, you appear. Without formal training, without years of sacrifice, you simply get on stage and dance as if you were born doing it." There was no accusation in her voice, only a deep sadness that Lucy understood perfectly. "I didn't intend to take anything from you," she responded with sincerity. "I didn't even know the academy existed until 2 days ago." Victoria sketched a bitter smile. "I know, and that makes it even harder to accept. For you, it's a gift fallen from the sky. For me, it's the result of years of work." Martha, who had remained silent, observing attentively, finally spoke. "Sometimes, child, life teaches us that the paths we believe are correct are not the only ones that lead to where we want to go." Victoria looked at her curiously. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "That both you and my granddaughter have something valuable to offer. You have technique, discipline, years of training. She has instinct, emotion, truth. Neither is better than the other. They are simply different." The old woman took a sip of her chocolate before continuing. "When I danced, I knew many like you, perfectionists, disciplined, impeccable, and I also knew others like Lucy, who danced from the soul, without thinking about technique. The best dancers were those who managed to combine both worlds." Victoria remained silent, processing the old woman's words. Finally, she looked directly at Lucy. "I didn't come to fight with you," she said firmly. "I came to propose something to you." Lucy looked at her with surprise. "What?" "Ms. Mitchell wants us to do a joint presentation for the end-of-course show, a collaboration among all the students." She paused, as if gathering courage. "I want you and I to create the choreography, together." The proposal took Lucy completely by surprise. For of all the reasons why Victoria might have come, this was the last she would have expected. "Why me? Why not work with one of your friends?" "Because I need to learn what you know how to do," Victoria responded with brutal honesty. "And I think you could benefit from learning what I know." She looked at Martha as if seeking support. "As your grandmother said, combining both worlds." There was a moment of silence in the small kitchen. Lucy considered the proposal, weighing its implications. "And what about the scholarship? We'll still be competing for it." "Yes," admitted Victoria, "but at least it will be a fair competition. You'll learn a bit of technique, I'll learn to be more authentic, and may the best win. She extended her hand across the table. What do you say? Partners for a month, rivals afterward? Lucy looked at her grandmother, who nodded slightly, indicating her approval. She took Victoria's hand and shook it. Partners. The following days marked the beginning of an unexpected collaboration. After classes, Lucy and Victoria stayed in the dance classroom, working on ideas for the joint choreography. At first, their styles constantly clashed. Victoria would get frustrated with Lucy's lack of technical precision, while Lucy found it difficult to make her partner understand the importance of emotional expression. No, 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 Victoria would say for the umpteenth time during one of their rehearsals. The arm has to be completely extended, not slightly bent. It's a matter of aesthetic lines. Lucy sighed, trying to follow the instruction. When I think so much about the position, I lose the connection with what I'm feeling, she complained. That's your problem, Victoria responded. You depend too much on emotion. Technique is there for when emotion doesn't come. It's like a map. You can always follow, even on bad days. It was a perspective Lucy had never considered. For her, dance had always been a spontaneous expression, not something that could be calculated or planned, but she was beginning to see the wisdom in Victoria's words. In turn, Lucy challenged Victoria to leave her technical comfort zone. Forget perfect positions for a moment, she would tell her. Close your eyes and just feel the music. Let your body respond naturally. For Victoria, this was initially terrifying. Without the security of her rehearsed movements, she felt vulnerable, insecure. But little by little, she began to find a freedom she had never experienced before. One afternoon, while they were practicing at Lucy's house under Martha's watchful eye, Victoria suddenly stopped. I think I have an idea, she said, with an enthusiastic gleam in her eyes. What if the choreography tells a story? The story of two dance styles, two ways of being that initially clash but eventually complement each other. Lucy nodded, immediately catching the vision. Like a dialogue between tradition and innovation, she added. Exactly, confirmed Victoria. I represent classical technique, you pure expression, and as the piece progresses, each one adopts elements of the other. Martha, who had been observing in silence, softly applauded. That, girls, is true art, not just showing what you know how to do, but telling a story that has meaning. With this new direction, work on the choreography advanced rapidly. Victoria taught Lucy the technical fundamentals that would allow her to execute more complex movements without losing her natural expressiveness. Lucy, in turn, helped Victoria connect with her emotions, to dance not just from the body, but also from the heart. Meanwhile, the relationship between the two evolved from a tense collaboration to a genuine friendship. They discovered that, beneath their apparent differences, they shared a common passion for dance and similar dreams for their future. One afternoon, while resting after an intense rehearsal, Victoria made a confession. You know, I've always envied you. Lucy looked at her with surprise. Me? Why? You've always been the perfect dancer, the model student. Victoria smiled sadly. Perfect, yes, but never free. Always dancing to meet expectations. My mother's, my teacher's, my own. You dance as if nothing else mattered, as if the moment of the dance was the only real thing in the world. It was an observation that touched Lucy deeply. She had never thought of her way of dancing as something others might envy. For her, it had simply been a form of escape, of freedom. I think each of us had what the other needed, she finally responded. And now, we both have a bit of both. As the date of the end-of-course show approached, the news of their collaboration had spread throughout the school. Ms. Mitchell, who had initially proposed the idea as an experiment, was amazed by the results. The choreography they had created together was truly innovative, mixing Victoria's technical precision with Lucy's emotional expressiveness in a dance dialogue that promised to be the highlight of the show. Even Director Sullivan, who had been following their progress through videos that Ms. Mitchell sent him, expressed his enthusiasm for seeing the final presentation. It's exactly the type of innovative approach we're looking for at the Academy, he commented during a phone call with the teacher. The fusion of technique and authenticity. The day before the show, Lucy received an unexpected call. It was Matthew, who had been consistently supporting her during the weeks of preparation. They had spent time together outside of school, attending dance performances, talking about their dreams, getting to know each other beyond the school hallways. "I just wanted to wish you luck for tomorrow," he said with a warm voice. "Although you don't need it. What you and Victoria have created is really special." "Thank you," replied Lucy, feeling a pleasant warmth in her cheeks. "I couldn't have done it without your support." There was a pause on the line. "There's something I want to ask you, Lucy," continued Matthew with a certain shyness. "After the show, there's a celebration at the Cultural Center. I was wondering if you'd like to go with me, not as friends, but as something more." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. Amid everything that had been happening, the feelings that had grown between her and Matthew had been pushed to the background. But they were there, silently blooming. "I'd love to," she responded with a smile that he couldn't see but surely could feel through the phone. The morning of the show dawned perfect. The Portland sky was clear, an intense blue that seemed to promise great things. The small auditorium of the school had been transformed for the occasion. The lights were perfectly configured, the stage decorated with sober elegance, and the chairs arranged to receive parents, teachers, students, and some special guests, including Director Sullivan and several representatives from professional dance companies. Backstage, the agitation was palpable. Students reviewed their routines, adjusted their costumes, gave each other encouragement. Lucy and Victoria, dressed in simple but complimentary outfits, waited for their turn in silence. They would be the last to present, the final act that would close the show. "Nervous?" asked Victoria, breaking the silence. Lucy nodded. "A little, but it's a good kind of nerves." "Me too," admitted Victoria, something she would never have confessed a few weeks ago. "But I trust in us, in what we've created together." They briefly held hands, a gesture of solidarity that symbolized how much both had changed. From her seat in the front row, Martha observed each presentation with interest, but her heart beat in anticipation of the moment her granddaughter would take the stage. Next to her was Victoria's mother, an elegant woman with a serious expression who had been a dancer in her youth. Although they didn't know each other, the two women shared the same expectant emotion. Finally, after a series of impressive individual and group performances, the moment arrived. Ms. Mitchell went up on stage to introduce the final act. "To close our show this year," she announced, "I have the honor of presenting a special piece, a collaboration that represents not only the talent of two extraordinary young dancers, but also the spirit of our school, the union of tradition and innovation, of technique and emotion, of discipline and freedom." She paused, looking towards the sides of the stage where Lucy and Victoria were waiting. "With you, Dialogue of Souls," performed by Victoria Pearson and Lucy Reyes. The lights dimmed to almost total darkness. A single spotlight illuminated the empty stage. The first chords of the music, specially composed by a senior student from the composition class, filled the auditorium. It was a melody that began with classical, structured notes, to then gradually blend with freer, more visceral rhythms. Victoria was the first to enter the stage. Her slender figure, illuminated by white light, began to move with the technical precision that characterized her. Each position was perfect, each turn executed with mathematical exactitude. The audience watched in silence, admiring the discipline and control she demonstrated. Then Lucy entered. With her grandmother's bracelet tinkling softly on her wrist, her movements clearly contrasted with Victoria's. Where the latter was precise and structured, Lucy was fluid and emotional. Where one showed technique, the other expressed feeling. At first, they danced on opposite sides of the stage as if representing two separate worlds. But as the music evolved, increasingly mixing its different styles, the dancers began to approach each other. Their movements, initially contrasting, started to influence each other. Victoria incorporated freer, more expressive elements. Lucy added technical precision to her natural fluidity. It was like observing a conversation through movement, a dialogue where each learned from the language of the other. The climax came when, in perfect synchrony, they performed an identical sequence of movements, completely fusing their styles. They were no longer the technical dancer and the emotional dancer. They were simply two artists who had found a common language, a perfect balance between discipline and freedom. The entire auditorium held its breath, completely captivated by the magic unfolding on stage. Martha felt tears of pride rolling down her cheeks. Victoria's mother, always so contained, applauded silently, with a smile of genuine admiration. When the music reached its final chord, Lucy and Victoria finished in the center of the stage, face to face, with joined hands, symbolizing the union of their previously separate worlds. The lights went out completely, leaving the image etched in the retina of the spectators. There was an instant of absolute silence, as if the audience needed to process what they had just witnessed. And then, an explosion of applause, cheers, and exclamations of admiration filled the auditorium. Everyone was on their feet, ovating the extraordinary performance. The lights came back on, revealing Lucy and Victoria, still on stage, smiling with a mixture of relief, pride, and pure happiness. They held hands and made a joint bow, receiving another wave of applause. Director Sullivan, visible from the stage in the front row, applauded with genuine enthusiasm. His habitually serious expression had been replaced by one of amazement and satisfaction. Next to him, Ms. Mitchell smiled with maternal pride. When they finally left the stage, they were received by their classmates with hugs and congratulations. The invisible barrier that had previously separated Lucy from the rest of the group no longer existed. She was one of them, respected not only for her newly discovered talent, but for who she was. Martha made her way through the crowd until she reached her granddaughter. She hugged her tightly without needing words. All she felt, all the pride, all the love was contained in that embrace. Victoria's mother also approached, with barely contained tears in her eyes. "I've never seen you dance like that," she told her daughter, with such joy. Victoria smiled, genuinely happy. "It's because for the first time I wasn't dancing to be perfect. I was dancing to be myself." Director Sullivan approached them, followed by Ms. Mitchell. His expression was solemn, but his eyes shone with barely contained enthusiasm. "Ladies," he began, addressing both of them, "what you've presented today goes beyond any expectation I might have had. You've demonstrated not only individual talent, but the capacity to create something greater through collaboration." He paused as if carefully considering his next words. "I've made a decision regarding the Academy's summer program." Lucy and Victoria exchanged nervous glances. This was the moment they had been both waiting for and dreading. The competition for the only full scholarship. "The scholarship we were offering," continued Sullivan, "was destined for an exceptional talent. But what I've seen today are two exceptional talents that together create something truly extraordinary." Another pause, this one longer. "Therefore, I've decided, with the approval of the Academy's Board of Directors, to offer not one, but 2 full scholarships this year." The words took a few seconds to register in the young women's minds. "2 scholarships?" repeated Victoria, incredulous. "For both of us?" Sullivan nodded. "With one condition, that you continue developing together this fusion of styles that you've initiated. The Academy needs innovation, needs this combination of technique and emotion that you represent." Lucy and Victoria looked at each other, processing the news. After weeks preparing to compete against each other, they were now offered the opportunity to move forward together. "What do you say?" asked Sullivan. "Do you accept?" They didn't need to consult with each other. The answer was clear in both their eyes. "We accept," they responded in unison. The celebration that followed was like a dream for Lucy. Surrounded by friends, family, classmates who now saw her with new eyes, Matthew approached her among the crowd with that shy smile she had come to adore. "You were incredible," he told her, gently taking her hand. "All of you is incredible." In that moment, with the music playing, the laughter around her and the sensation that a whole world of possibilities was opening before her, Lucy felt a fullness she had never experienced. She was no longer the invisible girl, the one who went unnoticed in the hallways. Nor was she just the talented dancer who had surprised everyone with her unexpected presentation. She was Lucy Reyes, a young woman who had found her voice, her space, her path. And most importantly, she had learned that she didn't have to walk that path alone. That night, while Martha prepared a tea before bed, Lucy sat with her in the small kitchen. "Thank you, Grandma," she said simply. The old woman looked at her curiously. "For what, my child?" "For teaching me to dance, for sharing your story with me, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Martha smiled with that mixture of wisdom and tenderness that only years can give. "Don't thank me, my child. Thank life, which has given you the opportunity that many of us didn't have. And now it's your turn to dance not just for yourself, but for all of us." Lucy nodded, understanding the depth of those words, understanding that her dance was no longer just hers, but part of a larger story, of a tradition that she would now continue in her own way, with technique and emotion, with discipline and freedom, with the weight of history and the lightness of the future, always dancing her own truth. Dear listeners, we hope that Lucy and Victoria's story has moved you as much as it moved us when writing it. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about overcoming, friendship, and personal discovery. Find it by clicking to your left. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and celebrate the transformative power of art. Which part of Lucy's story touched you most deeply? Have you had any experience where art changed your life? We await you in the comments to hear your reflections. Until next time,